David Shuster's on the line with us, political journalist and anchor over at Jazeera America. And you can tweet him at David Shuster, Shuster. And David, welcome back to the program.
Oh, Tom, it is always a pleasure to be on with you. How are you?
I'm great. It's been a long time. It's and Al Jazeera is going through some changes. I'm guessing you are. How's life, and what are your thoughts on the presidential campaign right now?
Well, Al Jazeera is going through some changes. Now, Al Jazeera America is going off the air, as a lot of folks know, at the end of April, but we're still chugging along. A lot of us here believe that you play as hard as you can until the whistle blows, and then you look up, and whether you like the score or not, that's the end of the game.
Yep.
So we're still chugging along, covering politics and trying to bring the people who are still with us the best. Make sure that their time is worth what we're doing. So the election has been fascinating. I mean, I think we got every indication, as you've pointed out, that Donald Trump will be the likely Republican presidential nominee, and it's an interesting time in terms of the GOP. I think the Democrats are also. I think there's still some time to go in terms of before the Democrats settle things out. But one thing that I've pointed out to a lot of people here, and that is you look at, for example, the revolution that Bernie Sanders started, and you look at where Donald Trump has some appeal, and they're both in common in terms of some of the trade deals that have cost American jobs, and that perhaps the United States has not done so well with things like NAFTA and what might be happening now with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which Bernie Sanders opposes and Hillary Clinton supports. And
actually, Hillary has come out against it.
I'm sorry, you're correct. She sometimes I get a little confused with her. She did come out against it, although as Secretary of State for many years she suggested a pivot to Asia and supporting it. So, but I think between sensitivities on trade deals between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders both talking about the corrupting influence of Wall Street money, as funny as it may sound when you hear it from Donald Trump, and then also their positions against the Iraq War, I do think there are some fairly progressive things that Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders have in common that may have some particular appeal to working class Americans that could be significant in the general election. So I think there's for whoever's going to be the nominee, whether it's regardless of whether it's Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders on the left, or depending on what Donald Trump does on the right, but I think America is moving in a direction that's unmistakable.
Yeah, there's a new survey just came out. I'm looking at this. I'm going to have to ask Troy this afternoon when I see him, who grew up in West Virginia, one of our producers over on the TV side. But the poll has Donald Trump at 40%, Ted Cruz 20%, Marco Rubio 15% in West Virginia, and it has Bernie Sanders 57% to 29% for Hillary Clinton, 14% undecided on the Democratic side. Out of West Virginia, that surprises me.
It's a little bit surprising, but I do think that, again, particularly with Americans who feel like American jobs have been hollowed out, or that things have gone across the border to Mexico or disappeared to China, there is something about Bernie Sanders' sort of consistency on trade deals and, oh, by the way, his argument that the United States needs to make sure that health care and education are a right and not a privilege. And I think there is something that's breaking through with a lot of folks when you keep hearing Bernie Sanders and a lot of people talking about the fact that every Western industrialized nation provides education through college and, oh, by the way, has some sort of Medicare system, universal health care system, which doesn't have to ruin you if you happen to get sick. I think a lot of Americans are saying, wait a second, our country is changing very quickly. Maybe we are falling behind other industrialized nations. What is it that they're doing that we are not? And I think particularly in areas like West Virginia and poorer parts of the United States and some of the rural working class parts of the United States, these messages resonate. And I think it's why a lot of people are wise to not discount Bernie Sanders just yet. There's still a lot of votes to be cast in this Democratic nomination.
Yeah. Well, Bernie and Hillary are tied right now in the delegate count at 51 each. So, we'll see where all this goes. But you said that you think that Donald Trump is going to be the Republican nominee. You're the first person that I've heard say that with some tone of confidence in his voice. It seems to me that the Republican Party, institutionally is probably going to do everything they can to keep Donald from becoming the nominee. He doesn't have a majority. He only has a plurality. If a couple more people drop out of the race and it becomes just him versus fill in the blank, I think fill in the blank is going to win, don't you?
Well, here's the reasoning I have with Donald Trump, and you're right. I think I sense a certain certainty about Donald Trump getting the nomination, and the reason being that in order for somebody else to sort of there to be two-man standing, you need, for example, Marco Rubio to pull out or Ted Cruz to pull out, and there to be one alternative. So in my reporting, the Republican establishment hates Ted Cruz far more than they hate Donald Trump. That we've seen a number of senators like Orrin Hatch and former senators like Trent Lott and others suggest that, you know what, Washington can work with Donald Trump. He's a deal maker. We cannot work with somebody like Ted Cruz who simply does not want Washington to get anything done. So I'm starting to see a number of establishment Republicans warm to the idea that, okay, maybe we can work with Donald Trump if he's the nominee. So I would bet that there's a greater effort to try to deny the nomination from Ted Cruz than from Donald Trump. But there's still the idea of, well, is it possible that a more Republican inside or establishment candidate like Marco Rubio can become the main Trump alternative and therefore the party can coalesce behind him? I'm not so sure that Rubio gets that. In all some of the polling and some of the analysis that's been done of Rubio supporters and Trump supporters, I still think that there's an argument that Trump would pick off some of the Ted Cruz supporters if Ted Cruz are out of the race.
Yeah, because so much of Ted Cruz's base is fundamentalist Christian / misogynist / racist / just generally freaked out.
Exactly, and making matters worse for the Republican Party is while there's a proportional delegate count now starting March 15th, which is just over 2.5 weeks. Starting March 15th, it's winner take all. So let's assume that Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio decide, hey, I still have a legitimate shot. If they go into March 15th and all those contests and through the month of March and then everything beyond, and you're still looking at three candidates, well, it's Donald Trump with 35 or 40%. He can still win 100% of the delegates in some of these states. So. And I think I also look at history. Nobody in the Republican side has ever won New Hampshire and won South Carolina and not won the nomination. And I just don't see any major thing changing that this time around. And to me, it seems like the Republican Party eventually is going to come around to the idea of, okay, let's try to figure out a way to work with Donald Trump and hope that when he looks up and realizes that he's just about got the nomination, that he will then turn to some Washington establishment hands and say, okay, I'm really here and I could use your help. Yeah.
In other words, stop being a bombastic. I don't even want to call him a populist. It's almost fascistic. I mean, the rhetoric that he's using of hate and fear and division. I think it was Dave Johnson who wrote a piece for Alternet where he went back and discovered that Trump has been appearing on Michael Savage's show for months and months and months. In fact, he announced his candidacy for president on Savage's show. And basically, Donald Trump has just picked up every single one of Michael Savage's positions. And Savage, who hates George W. Bush, by the way. And I find that really interesting.
It is interesting, and it gets to how shrewd a tactician Donald Trump has been, and that he has realized from early on that there are certain fissures in the Republican Party that he can exploit. And the cynic in me suggests that Donald Trump is doing this simply to try to get elected, that he's not quite as crazy or quite as hateful as he likes to come across, but that he recognizes there's a whole host of Republican voters out there who are so angry at the Republican establishment or so angry at Washington and see the country changing and don't quite understand what's going on that they are.
But David, weren't there a lot of union workers and gays and Jews who were saying the same thing in 1932 about this young guy Adolf Hitler?
Well, I think I'd like to hope that the U.S. Checks and balances and the separation of powers in our government between the judiciary and the legislative and the executive branch would still be able to withstand somebody like Donald Trump. But I'm not even sure we're going to need to test it. My sense is that, Donald Trump will get the nomination, but then I can't see any way that he gets the general election, no matter who he's running against. That even if Hillary Clinton is indicted and she's facing criminal indictment, I still think that she would beat Donald Trump in a general election.
Hang on, David.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Sorry, we always get stepped on there. David Shuster, political journalist and anchor over at Al Jazeera. Tweet him at David Shuster. David, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Tom. Great to be with you.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.